Thank you all for being here. We usually have at least some familiar music on our programs, but on this one, it was sort of an exploration for all of us, and hopefully for you too. This is probably all new music. And we just heard from our first composer of the evening, Francesca Caccini, who lived in the early 17th century and came from a musical family. Her father, Giulio Caccini, was part of this little group of artists that we usually refer to as the Florentine Camerata, along with Jacopo Peri and a couple of other people, that basically invented what we think of as opera at the beginning of the 17th century. And Giulio Caccini put out a book of music very ambitiously titled Le Nuove Musiche, the new musics, in plural. Right at the beginning of the 17th century, they're very consciously breaking with the Renaissance, and his daughter Francesca followed in his footsteps, and her publication was called Il Primo Libro delle Musiche, the first book of the musics. Equally ambitious because there was no second book. She never got around to publishing another one. And the piece that we just heard actually could have come from the 16th century, really, although the players added some variations. You can tell that it kind of repeated itself, kind of like a pop song or something. Whereas the next piece that we're going to play really is the new music, the new Baroque style from the early 17th century. And what does this mean? Well, instead of having a beat like that, It's all about expressing the emotions. It is through composed. There's no real repetition as in a pop song with different verses. And it really is about painting the emotions in music. And that was the hallmark of the early Baroque style. Very sort of free and all about expressing the affects. So whereas in the last song you could have had words, and of course the words are usually about love, because most songs have always been about love. And back then the text was always, it was always the dichotomy. Oh, I'm in love, this is so great, I'm gonna die. This is terrible. I can't take the suffering of love, right? So those kind of words could sit on top of very pleasant music like we just heard. Not here. This is, I destroy myself and burn. That's what love feels like to this speaker. we can only really imagine all the enormous obstacles that women in the 17th century faced in order to do anything other than menial domestic work. And Francesca Caccini was able to have a life as an artist and publish her music and gain some notoriety, largely because her family was not poor. There was another avenue, which was the religious avenue, which brings us to our second composer, Isabella Leonarda, who spent her entire life in a convent as a nun. And, you know, it seems like a cruel bargain, but a lot of women in convents managed to find creativity and intellectual stimulation as part of that withdrawing from the same society that made everything impossible for women. So Isabella Leonarda, we don't know that she had any formal music training before she became a nun as a teenager. And she had kind of a late start in music. Most of the music that we have by her was written after the age of 50. It seems like she didn't start until well into adulthood. And she left an impressive amount, over 200 works that we know of. And this comes from her 16th publication. So while in a convent, she managed to have her music published and get out in the world, which is how we know it. It was printed. This is from her Opus 16, which I believe may have been her last collection. So this is music, I don't know when it was written, but published when she was in her 70s. The first piece that we're going to play is the first piece from Opus 16. And it is a trio. I'm going to play it on a little teeny Italian recorder. I'm not saying anything. It's pretty much up to date for the 1690s when it was published. But it does look backward a little bit. I can't say that it's totally au courant, unlike the next piece we're going to play. 16 collection. And this work is for just violin. So I'm going to go back on guitar here. And as I said, this is a remarkable piece that we're about to play. It's not only very good, I think, in terms of the quality of the composition, but it's also very much up to date. So here we have a woman in her mid-70s writing music very much in the style of the music that the kids in Rome and Venice were writing. And I find that kind of inspiring. Classical music generally has always been sort of a multi-generational affair, but it's also been driven by the energy of the young. I think every time there's been a big stylistic change, it's usually powered by young composers. But here we have a great exception. I love this piece. one of the things that happened over the course of the 17th century, which is where all this music that we've heard so far comes from, is the development of this instrument right here. This is the oboe, and it was a brand new thing all over Europe around 1700. The French had had it for a couple of decades, and it spread everywhere, and it was firmly established by the time of Anna Bonn. Now, Anna Bonn di Venezia is what she liked to call herself, obviously grew up in Venice, spent her whole life in Venice, I believe. And her father and mother both worked in the opera business. So not exactly musicians, but her father was a librettist, I believe. Anyway, and yeah, no, her mother was a singer. So, this is the opposite case from Isabella Leonarda. All the music that we remember Anna Bonn for was written when she was a teenager. So the collection that this next piece comes from came out when she was 15, and I believe that next we're going to hear something from her second collection, which she might have already turned 16 by then. And it's in 3 movements, as you see in your program. There's, I tend to not list the movements for the 17th century music because they're so episodic and they go by so quickly sometimes that it's not worth sort of keeping track of them. And one of the theory, what we were all taught in music school, is that those little movements became more differentiated until we get to the high Baroque sonatas, where they're definitely one movement, second movement, third movement, discrete pieces. There's another theory for that, which is that the high Baroque sonata, of which we're about to play an example, is actually an extraction of the soloist's role in an opera. The hero comes out the first time he sings, it's going to be, tell you what kind of a character is he. Is he a lover or a fighter? By the time you hear the hero of the opera sing again, the conflict is underway. And so it's an action piece. The third movement, when there is one and it's slow, is when the hero is languishing in a dungeon or some other classic third act situation, whereas the last time that you hear the hero sing, the conflict has been resolved in the last act, and usually what you get is something in triple time that's like a minuet with some chances for showing off. And this piece perfectly encapsulates that sort of model, except that there's no slow third movement. By this time, they had kind of dispensed with that tragic bit, and then let's just cut to the happy ending. And that's what we get here, the sonata by Anna Bonn. going to leave the stage to our colleague here, or harpsichord by Anna. the last composer whose works we're going to present for you is Antonia Bembo, another Venetian who seems to have had a bad marriage. And to escape said bad marriage, she had to leave Venice. And you couldn't just go next door. She had to go all the way to France. It wasn't a simple matter of hiring a lawyer back then. And it is because of this that we know of her, because she really landed on her feet once she got to Paris. She was a singer. We don't know anything about her career in Venice, but in Paris she managed to sing for the king, who really liked it and awarded her a pension. And skip forward a few years, and she dedicated an opera to King Louis XIV, no less. And it was performed, and it survives. Unlike Anna Baum's opera, written for Prince Esterhazy, which is lost. This one survives. It's called L'Ercole Amante, Hercules the Lover. And in spite of the silly title, it is not a comedy. And the four little movements that we're going to play for you are probably just incidental music that the theater needed to change the scenery, or get somebody into a different costume, or send in the dancers for a couple of minutes. So we have a little adagio, then two fast pieces that really are probably meant to accompany stage business, and I have no idea what that stage business is. And we end with this lovely little minuet. And if you're wondering why I went and covered my head, it's because I forgot to do it earlier, which is why I was perspiring during the last piece. My mistake. Once again, thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you at other concerts next season. Am I forgetting anything?
We haven't announced next season yet, but we're going to soon. So
but if you
stay
are on our mailing list,
and you'll know about all the great features we provide you.
And it's been great being here in this just gorgeous.
We have a lot of videos online, so if you ever miss us, you can always go back and usually watch. This program is recorded back there. You can go back and watch it.
You know, it's been a real pleasure being in this room for 3 shows this season. We hope to come back next season, and if not, you can catch us at our regular venues. Hi.
other groups do vocational, religious music.
Yes.
But I
There's a lot of it.
didn't realize she also